Thanks so much for having me in this virtual setup. I told you when we talked last time, but I think once I was able to go to New York and attend the New York Web Performance Meetup a couple of years ago. So I guess this is my second time. And thanks again for having me, and welcome everyone. We're not a huge group, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you have at the end of the talk. It's not going to be too long, I hope, and it's going to be interesting for everyone. And just write your questions down, and then we'll have a Q&A space at the end. So I'm going to get started. So actually, before I start with the actual presentation, I want to tell a little bit about myself. So I'm originally from Uruguay, which is a small country in South America, for the ones who don't know where it is. I was born in the capital city, which is Montevideo, and I started my professional career in software testing, specifically in performance testing, but on the back end. So mostly the projects that I was participating in was regarding load testing. I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm going to actually talk about client-side performance. Throughout the years, and by working with a lot of mobile teams, that's how the idea of Apptim, which is my current startup, came to life. And besides working at Apptim, I'm the director and a board member at Abstracta, which is a software testing consulting business that has more than 11 years of experience in this field. And I actually moved to San Francisco with this company. And that's how I basically got to live in the US. Also, while I'm not working at my startup, I like doing kitesurfing. I'm also vegan, so I cook a lot of plant-based food. And the other thing that I'm happy actually to see that there's another woman speaking next time is that I am really interested, and I like supporting projects that promote more participation of women in IT. Specifically, of course, in testing and performance, because this is the area that I know the most, and I don't know a lot of women in performance. So please, if you know any, tell them to reach out to me. I like to talk with them and create a community around this topic as well. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the agenda, and then we're gonna jump into each topic. I'm gonna talk about how performance impacts user experience in mobile. So I'm pretty sure you're all very familiar with performance, mostly web, I guess, because that's the main topic of the meetup. But I am gonna actually talk about a little bit about the difference of accessing a website on mobile versus also an actual mobile app, a native mobile app. So I'm gonna discuss that at the beginning. I'm gonna focus on client-side performance, what things we can measure on each type of these apps, and then I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper on how we can incorporate client-side performance testing early on in our development cycle, and mostly focusing on mobile apps. So we're going to be talking a lot about mobile. I'll share some tools, most of them open source. Maybe you already know some of them as well for web testing. And then at the end, if we have time, I'm going to do a quick demo of the first product that we actually built at Apptim, which is Apptim Desktop. And this is the tool that allows anyone today in a mobile team to test the performance of their apps really fast. So we made a solution that you can download. It's actually free now. So if you're interested, or if you have a mobile app that you want to test the performance and get insights from our tool, you can go ahead after the webinar and download it. It's free, and we actually want feedback from users right now, from testers, developers, product owners, anyone who cares about performance that is involved in creating mobile apps. We want to hear your feedback, and that's what we care the most. So I'm going to show that at the end, and then we're going to have time for Q&A. So let's jump into the main topic, which is why we should care about performance. I'm pretty sure you already know that this is important, but specifically when we think about mobile, and this is something that Sergey actually just mentioned, this is the first time in history that the number of users in mobile is actually greater than desktop. And this is a huge, it is very important for us, the testers and developers, to think about who are, where our users are coming, how are they accessing our website, or of course, if they're using a web app or a mobile app. And this data actually is from Statista from this year. So 54% of users worldwide are accessing either a website either from a mobile or from a tablet. And then the number on desktop is less. Why should we care about this? I think, you know, it's obvious that we need to test in mobile now more than ever. And also the fact that if we think about a mobile device, it is a computer, but it has less, it has more constraints in terms of power. So everything that we're gonna render and everything, all the logic on the client side for mobile specifically has to be optimized, because we have less resources available for our website to run and to provide that experience for our users. Same for mobile apps. So I think it's critical to think specifically about our mobile users and how we are providing the best experience that we can for them as well. So just to talk about a little bit about what's the impact on the user experience, on the UX of mobile web performance. So some numbers, you know, the top first complaint of users is slow pages in mobile, how slow a page is loading, and actually it ranks higher than the site crashing. And that's why we care a lot about how fast our page is loading on, you know, different mobile devices. That's actually the number one issue that mobile users complain about today. The other aspect, specifically for mobile and user experience, is that the expectations from mobile users are higher than a user accessing through the browser through a desktop or a PC or a Mac. Actually, they either expect to load as fast or even faster than the experience on desktop. And this is usually below 4 milliseconds for a page to load. So these expectations are even higher for in mobile, the experience that we should provide. On the other hand, of course, we have native apps. You know, it's usually considered, it's been proved in a way that, you know, the frameworks that these mobile apps use, both you know, native frameworks, Android and iOS, they usually run faster than just running JavaScript code. So that's one of the reasons why many teams might consider developing you know, a native mobile app instead of having a mobile-friendly website. And actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. You know, should we build, if we're thinking about performance, should we build a mobile app or should we stay with our mobile website? I just put some numbers. Actually, this is from this year, like first half of 2020. And this is a report from, it's called Sensor Tower. What they found out that the consumer spending on mobile apps grew significantly during this first half of 2020. It actually reached $50 billion in spend worldwide, both on the App Store and the Google Play Store. And of course, this growth was driven by COVID-19 and how it impacted the user behavior. You know, we're all in our house. We just use our mobile phones to, you know, buy things that we might need or not. But this actually created a huge increase in the spend on mobile apps. Actually, was 20% more than the same period last year. The same report also showed that, and this is something pretty interesting also, because I've been talking about this with some teams in the past, that it also increased around 26% the first time app installs. So people are still installing apps for the first time, which is something that might go against even my own experience, that I usually don't want to install more apps than the ones that I already have. So that would be also something that shows that there's still interest in having native apps running and providing some different experience than a mobile website. But the question is, does this mean that we should choose to develop a mobile app instead of having, you know, a mobile-friendly website? I'll say that you know, the right choice, I guess, depends on what's the business objective. And if I had to consult with the team and they will ask me, like, would you recommend having our website being turned into mobile friendly, or doing optimization from our mobile users, or should we go down the path and develop a native app? I would say it depends. You know, if you want to offer you know, mobile friendly content to a wide range of people, then I would say probably a mobile website is the best way to go, right? But however, you know, when you want to engage better, when you want to interact and communicate better with your customers, you drive loyalty, I will say that a mobile app actually presents a better option. So it really depends on the goal of, you know, the business behind the website or even the app, and how you want to engage with your users, and actually who your audience is, right? So there's no right answer. Basically depends. I will talk a little bit about what are the benefits of both. You probably know this, but when we think about mobile websites, the first things that come to mind is it is something that is accessible for everyone. Now you just need to have you know, a mobile phone, and then from any browser installed in your phone, you can access the website. So it's pretty straightforward. You don't need to update the app. It's just you know, basically you update your backend, you update your app, and then anyone can access the latest version. There's no brainer there. And then usually it is cost effective, so it's cheaper than, you know, building a native app. So there are benefits of there are more than these benefits. I'll say this is the main things that people will consider when going down the path of having, you know, a mobile website or the native mobile app. On the other hand, if we think about what are the, you know, good things, what are the benefits of having mobile apps, well, they provide, you know, more interactive ways to interact with your users, to engage with them. You have the intuitive interfaces, like use of gestures. You can use the mobile device features and access camera, contents list, to phone calls, GPS, and that is why many of the mobile native apps that we have today exist, because they can actually make use of these device features. You know, they work offline as well, so that might be an advantage in many cases. You can provide better personalization, so you have ways to ping your users to show them exactly the content that they want to see, depending on what actions they made in the past. So it also provides extra functionalities, and it usually, I wouldn't say always, but it usually works faster if it's well programmed. And if they actually take into consideration a lot of the things that I'm going to talk today, it usually works, or should work, faster than the website, if it's well implemented in many senses. Having said this, I'm pretty sure you know that there are new technologies as well to consider. So today the world is not black and white, meaning a website or a native app. There are other options. I just listed two here that I guess also are the ones that I've been hearing more, or I've been participating in projects when they use them. The first one is actually an open source project, AMP project. It was originally developed by Google and Twitter. Before, you probably remember it was called Accelerated Mobile Pages. And one of the goals of the project at the time, and I guess still now, is to help create optimized mobile web pages. So I actually saw that, for mobile websites, there's a need to create ways to optimize it for the mobile users. I guess that was a good starting point, and that's still available. Let's just leave there the link if you want to check it out if you're not familiar with it. The other one, which I guess is the one that is gaining more popularity, and I'd really recommend anyone who's considering in building a new mobile app to take a look at it, which is progressive web apps. I will say progressive web apps is the best of both worlds. They are just web applications, but they've built and enhanced with APIs, and they can deliver native-like capabilities. So this device capabilities that the mobile native apps can access. PWA also rely on them, and they of course have the benefit of being just one single code base, and you can update it once, and you can reach everyone as if it is a website. I'm not gonna get into a lot of details on how they're built, but basically it is an alternative today when you're considering which way to go, and I will totally recommend you to take a look. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot more coming out from these technologies in the future, and looking to improve the way we develop and the way we deliver experiences in mobile. Okay, so now that I talk a little bit about the difference between how we can have like websites in mobile, native apps, and also everything in between, or at least two things in between. Let's dig deeper on what we can measure on the client side, of course, and also how this what affects the performance basically of these two types of applications. I'm going to focus on the pure web app and the mobile native. So when it comes to performance, there are a lot of differences in how they are built, and that's how then we should think about what it's interesting to measure in each app. Of course, the mobile applications depend on the underlying frameworks that are provided by the operating system. So today it's Android and iOS. On the other hand, when we think about a web app, they usually have a client-server application where the client that includes the user interface and the client-side logic will run on a web browser. So it's of course they're built differently, and with these defined differences, there are different metrics that we can measure on each, and things that we can monitor on the client side that will provide us an holistic view on how our apps are performing. I'm going to mention a few of the metrics that we can measure on web apps, mostly caring about mobile devices, because as I mentioned before, the client-side processing in mobile is constrained by slower CPUs. We have less memory. We don't have the same capabilities as we have on desktop. So we should consider that we are our website is going to be accessed in a way from a device that has less power, and we need to make sure that everything that we can that is optimized to run as fast as possible. Just to mention a few things that we can look at and see how we can optimize. Of course, the size of the images that our website has, the parsing times from JavaScript, what cache policies we're using, how we are loading or rendering below the full content, and many others. You probably know way better than I do, at least some of the people in the audience, what things we should care about in web, but thinking about how all the restrictions in a way that we have on mobile devices. And of course, this changes a lot when we are talking about users that have the latest devices, and comparing to a market that could be Asia, South America, when there's a lot of users still in old versions of Android, for example. and how we can provide a good experience for them as well. We can't only think about the latest versions of iOS and Android, where the devices come with a lot more capabilities, better hardware, better CPUs, memories. But we need to also take into consideration when thinking about performance in general, who our users are, and what devices they're using, where they are accessing from, and be able to optimize for them. Then when we think about mobile native apps, and specifically Android, I think this is where the biggest challenge is today when we think about performance, which is all the versions of operating systems that has been released in the past years that actually resulted in a huge fragmentation in the market. So just to give you an idea, so 7 years ago, 2013, there were 4 versions of the Android iOS in the market. To get a 70% coverage of the Android market, meaning I want to test my app on 70% of the OSs are available, I only required devices with 3 different OSs, and that was enough. But what happens last year? If we go fast forward to 2019, in order to get that same coverage, so in order to cover 70% of the Android market, we have to test on at least 6 different OSs. I will say now it's 7 because Android 10 was released also last year. So this means that the actual amount of testing, and mostly performance testing on the actual device on the client side, has grown a lot in the last years. And this might not have been an issue 7 years ago. And this is, of course, growing year after year. Although a lot of users are updating to the latest versions, you can see still in Android there's a huge fragmentation. And it affects the performance because we're actually talking about differences in operating system, how the app will access services, and things that we should make sure that it actually behaves, our app behaves as expected on each of these OSs. Of course, iOS developers have an easier life, I guess. Most of the iOS users will update to the latest version in the following weeks or months that Apple released it. Usually it's around 70-80% max will be already updated to the latest version. You still need to test on different devices. You do have different versions of iPhones, you have iPads, so there's a lot of there's a lot of testing that needs to happen on iOS. But as I said, I think the biggest challenge for mobile teams today is on Android. So I talk about what we should, at least I mentioned what we should measure on web. So what we should measure on mobile apps, and what type of problems we can identify. So I divide it in 4 big groups. There are other things that I think we could also consider, but just as an introductory talk. So first is the group. I group it everything related to the device resource usage. So this could be the percentage of CPU that our app is consuming, the memory that the app is using, the data that is being sent and received from the app through the network, and of course the battery usage, so how much battery is using. These metrics are related, of course. Like if we have an app that consumes a lot of CPU, the battery is going to be drained faster for sure. The same with the data that's being sent and received. We can identify memory leaks if we measure this on the client side. If our app is not releasing memory properly, and we are actually measuring that, let's say we're using the app and we are like exploring it for a certain amount of time, and then the app will crash. It might crash because there's a memory leak, because the app wasn't releasing it properly, and after a certain period of time it ran out of memory and it crashed. That's something that we can discover, or we can actually find out when we are testing the performance on the client side. we need to take into consideration that when we install an app on any device, we are sharing the resources of the device with all the other apps that are installed and are running. So it's not something that only depends on us. We need to optimize it to, co-live with other apps and share the resources accordingly. Another group that we have is rendering. This is, drawing times, how much time that it takes to render a certain screen of your application. It could be, rendering times, frames per second as well. It's pretty known that to achieve fluid rendering, which is 60 frames per second, each frame will need to complete in less than 16 milliseconds. If this doesn't happen, usually the user will see a disruption in the animation. The app could freeze. It will affect the user experience. How you can identify what was happening, you should measure these metrics and others. What happens if we actually high rendering times, because we don't want that to happening? We basically draw a lot on the screen. It will probably use a lot of CPU or GPU, and it will cause a high battery usage. So this is something that as developers and testers, we need to think about when we are developing our apps, and what's the end user experience, and what things we can measure to prevent those bad experiences to happen. Then we have errors. Could be exceptions that happen in the app. It could be crashes, of course, that the app closes for accessing methods that are not allowed. Of course, memory leaks as well if that happens. Specifically for Android, we can also measure application not responding errors, which is ANR. This usually happens when, as a user, you will see in the screen, you will see a message that says, you want to wait for the app to respond, or you want to close it. So that happens when there's certain time passes after you do an action and there's no response, and then you'll see that error. And last but not least, everything related to response times from the user perspective. So this could be actions that you do. This could be transactions that happen in the app that you want to measure. Of course, app startup time is something that a lot of developers care about, which is how much time does it take for your app to open. So, first time you click it and then it's available for you to interact with it. How much time does it take? That is very important for user activation, that first installation of your app. And industry-wide, I would say it's accepted that time is less than 3 seconds. I would say the last 2 years, they're pushing it even lower. But 3 seconds is kind of the accepted time for an app to launch. And then regarding the transactions, you are measuring that from the user experience. You can measure, let's say, how much time a login on the app takes for the user to actually see the next screen. In order to do optimizations or identify what you can change and improve, you need to consider there is not a chance that the loading time or the rendering time in the device itself, but it also will have probably the time that it took for the server to respond. It could be some database response time as well if there's an SQL being sent, and the network latency if there's any. So in order to improve, in a way, our login time of an app, we need to consider every piece of the puzzle and how that affects the response time experienced by the user. But there are things that we can measure from the client side, and then to the optimizations, we have to dig a little bit deeper. These are some examples. Now, when we think about the tooling that is available today for this, so for web, and you probably know, there are many others. You're probably familiar with Lighthouse from Google DevTools. A lot of other tools are built on top of Lighthouse. I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but you probably know that it helps you to know how fast your web page loads in mobile. It gives you tips and optimization on things like how to load JavaScript resources, what are the cache policies they're using, and more things. There's a lot of good information that it's just seen by running a quick test with Lighthouse. Besides that, I'll say Apm Tools, so application performance management tools, actually can help a lot also in optimizing web performance or the client side. Neuralink is just one that I've used. There are many others that help capturing this information for web apps. If we think about native apps, so native apps, I'll say when I think about how to measure performance, usually there's the profiling tools. The profiling tools provided by Android Studio for Android, and then you have instruments, which is part of Xcode for iOS apps. And these are very widely used by developers and even testers, and they help a lot in debugging an app and understanding or looking for what's the root cause of a performance issue that you already identify. So they are very helpful. Of course, you need to have Android Studio or Xcode installed and in order to be able to profile your app and do optimizations. And last May, so a couple of months ago during the pandemic, we launched our first tool from our startup Apptim, which is Apptim Desktop. It is a desktop tool. We actually made it in a way that anyone in the team, even if you're not a developer of the app and you don't have Android Studio installed, you could actually measure and capture performance information of your app. So how's the mobile performance? And try to make it really easy for anyone to start measuring how the app behavior is. I'm gonna actually do a quick demo on how it works if you're interested in seeing how we actually capture performance data as well, both for Android and iOS apps. It's gonna be probably just 10 minutes. Let me go back there. And yeah, if you have any questions or if you want to dig deeper in anything of what I'm showing, we will have time at the end. But as I mentioned, we make it super easy for anyone to use it. So first, you just need to download the app. It's available for Windows and for Mac. In this case, I'm running on Mac, so I'm gonna do a demo with the Mac app. If you download for Mac, you can run tests both on iOS apps and Android apps. So I'm going to do a quick demo with an Android app. I have my device connected here on the right side of my screen. This is an emulator. I should use it for demos. I wouldn't never recommend testing performance on emulators. So I just choose a device. In this case, I only have one. I'm going to choose the app that I'm going to use for the demo. And in this case, I'm going to just do an exploratory test. This is typical manual testing, exploring an app. We will have another version of the tool that includes a pod in the future, but I'm just going to put demo, the name of my test session. And right now what's happening is, so Apptim is connecting to the device. It's going to start the app automatically, and since then I'm able to interact with the app, and then Apptim is recording everything that's happening under the hood in a way. So I can just start like a quick test. I'm gonna click, I have many options on this app. So I can introduce a text, I have checkbox, I have test different functionalities. At any time during the test, I can actually also report a bug if I want. It doesn't have to be, it's not actually only meant for exploring, and if you find something, you're able to report it. I'm not going to do it because I want to do it a quick test, and then I want to show you the report. I'm going to actually crash the app so we can capture that. So the app just crashed, it closed, and I'm just going to end my session. And that's how easy it is. You just start the test, Apptim captures everything, you finish the test, and now we are gathering all the data from the app and the device, and we create a session report. This session report is the one that actually shows you how the app behaved in these areas that I just mentioned. So I can open it locally. You don't need to publish it anywhere. You can, run the test locally and host them locally, or you can actually publish them to your Aptim workspace where you can share with the team from there. I'm going to open it locally, and I'm going to quickly show you a few metrics that we capture. In this case, it was an emulator, so there's a few things that they don't make a lot of sense. But just to give you an idea, for each metric that we measure, we have different thresholds. So these thresholds that you see them here as green, yellow, and red, the idea behind them is to help you as the user to see if this is something that, how good am I in whatever, CPU usage, how good am I in the amount of nested layouts, or things like that. Of course, this depends on each app, if it's something that you should be aware of. If it's an exception, as in this case, you will see a warning. This is just a summary. You can see how the average was of memory, power usage, errors, information about the session. We capture a video of the actual test. So this is very helpful then to reproduce if there was any issue or crash when it happened and what was happening in the test. And then for each of the metrics, you also get these nice graphs where, you have a timestamp that at any time of the test, you can see how this specific metric, which in this case is CPU, how it was behaving. It was pretty low here. You have the same for memory, a lot of different graphs for Android as well. You also capture the amount of threads in your app. And again, you have power usage, so how it was during the test. We also capture crashes, as I mentioned. In this case, it was an exception that was captured by Aptim. I made it crash. Many times we have users that they're amazed because they are testing the app, but they don't realize they didn't saw there was a crash, and then they open the report and they realize, oh, there was something happening in the background, and I wasn't sure how to report it. So everything, all this information is captured automatically at the end of the session. You get the report, and for each of these metrics, you also have all the logs, and this is very, very useful for developers, performance testers that they want to dig deeper on what was going specifically at certain point in time during the test and with that specific device. So this is the Aptim desktop version. It has some other cool features. So I can actually go back home and I can see all the test sessions that I ran in the past as well. I can compare them if I want to see what things changed. I'm actually going to show you quickly, as I see we have some time left, a report for an iOS app, which is pretty similar. Of course, some of the metrics are not like ANRs are not captured on iOS. For iOS, we have same idea in terms of thresholds, but with the best practices from Apple, which differ a bit. So as I mentioned, if you have an iOS app, you can also use Aptim, and you will see and get, in this case, it's a demo app that we built. You will see and get information. You can see here the memory usage was pretty high. You will see the warning, and then you can go to the memory tab, and you can see the graph and see, in this case, 34 seconds during the test. At that time, there was a peak in memory usage. So we can go back to the video and see what we were doing at the time, and then review the logs. And that's usually how our current users will see this information and do something with it, which is what we expect them. Same with the Android app. Sorry, in this case, you can see this was a real device. There's a lot of data that was being sent and received as well, but it's pretty much the same. And then you have bug reports. If I will click on a bug, you can see it here. And the idea is just we want to make it really easy for anyone to access this information, and that's why we we built this tool, which is Aptim Desktop, that anyone can download and start using it. And that actually gives me the I'm gonna go back to my slides. The idea of having this tool available is that anyone can use it. But when should we start testing for app performance? And I'm pretty sure that you're all gonna say as soon as possible, as I did. But it's really something that as soon as you have your first version of your website, no matter if it's only like one page, you can run it with Lighthouse and page speed and see like how you're doing, and then you start adding new functionalities, and then you can see how that affects the performance. I think it's pretty straightforward for websites. Doesn't mean that everyone does that. For mobile apps, I think when you need to have your first version of the first version of your package app ready in order to be able to install it on a device and actually measure how it behaves in the real world. But it can be first version 0.1 that you have ready, and you can start measuring this. And why is it important, or why I think you should consider this early on? Well, first, it will help you understand how the app behaves, and more important, familiarize yourself if you're the tester. If you come from back-end performance world, this is something that might be new as well. So there's a lot of learning in order to be able to understand also what's acceptable for us. We have to define what are those non-functional requirements, and then be able to test them and see how you're doing. You can install your app on different devices and see what are the changes there as well. The earlier you start, you have more data to see how it evolves. Every time you add new functionalities to your app, you want to know if that affects the performance or not. So that's something that you can identify early on if you add this type of test and information to your test cycles. And of course, the main one is to prevent new performance issues to reaching your end users, which is actually pretty common, having new versions of apps being updated, and then we as users, we have new issues that we weren't experiencing with the previous version. And I don't think this is something that should be left to the end, or even worse, wait for users to complain for us to see what's wrong, which sometimes it happens. So yeah, that's what my main topic for today. Talk a little bit about the differences between web and mobile apps, why we should care about performance, and what we can do today to start testing for client-side performance earlier. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, or any thoughts and feedback as well. Everything is welcome. So I'm gonna go to the chat. I have it here.
Yeah, folks, feel free to leave a question in the chat, and we will be able, well, Sofia will be able to answer it, or maybe not, or maybe yes. So I'll start with a hard question that I wrote already. So you mentioned that the quarantine changed the behavior and increased the mobile usage quite a bit, right? And therefore drove quite a lot of business into the mobile. Do you think it will change how consumers behave, kind of sped up the change in consumer behavior and shifted the industry to frankly from retail and other offline worlds into online and mobile in particular? And will it drive more investment into performance world?
Totally. I think this accelerated something that we have already seen. Personally, myself, I've been in performance for at least 8 years, and sometimes it was really hard to convince stakeholders why we should test performance. I think that's changing, and in these past months, because of the increase of the digital services and everyone trying to buy and connect from their house, using your PC or your mobile phone, I think there were a lot of companies that realized that this is something that they need to invest more if they want to, keep the customers happy. And of course, the increase in the retail industry and e-commerce specifically. I think that's a huge industry where performance is critical for them, because it's directly related to am I gonna be able to achieve my goal of buying something on your website in the time that I have, or I'm gonna be frustrated because the experience is not what I expected and I can't even finish doing my checkout. So we probably all had at least one bad experience, and I think that's being accentuated by the needs from the businesses. And I hope so that performance becomes something that is at the center of many decisions on where to invest. And I feel like this pandemic was a trigger for many changes that were already happening and that were accelerated. So yeah, I can read the questions. I think I have them. So Alexandru, your question is, does this work with platforms like Xamarin? So it does work. Any hybrid app like Xamarin, Unity, React, we still focus, at least from Apptim, we still measure everything that is on the native side. So you will get all these metrics from a Xamarin app, but we won't be able to tell you what you can optimize from the Xamarin framework itself, if that's the question. But you can totally run tests with Apptim using hybrid apps. Then there's another question from Ansari. How can the rendering metrics such be measured on Apptim other profilers under various frame rates? I don't think I quite understand the question. Maybe if you can clarify it. If we can measure under changing the frame rates, if that's the question.
That's actually somewhat maybe related to another question I had about the recording. I noticed that you do record the video of the transaction, like of the test. How many frames per second is that? Can you really be precise enough to correlate video with performance changes, performance metric changes?
Oh yeah. We make sure it's a little bit different in iOS and Android how you capture the video, but we want to be as precise as possible, that when you have a peak in a graph that is shown in a certain timestamp, you can correlate that to a time of the video. We don't, the way we actually capture this data is by actually using the native tools from both Android and iOS. So through ADV on Android and using instruments on iOS. So we don't want to affect also the performance itself of the app, because we are also there. And there's a question that we usually get asked, like, how do we capture all this? And how do we make sure that, Apptim is not in the middle and doing weird stuff to the app? So yeah, we're pretty consistent in that, making sure that the information that you capture is true to what it's happening in the device. For Android specifically, sometimes it is a challenge to be able to, for example, some apps, although you can filter through the process of the app, there's other services running, and sometimes the network is sending requests to third parties that you might not even care about. That's being captured as well. It happens. So sometimes what we do with some teams that we work with is we actually use Apptim with their app, and we show them in the logs what they should care about, and maybe define what's something that has to be improved on, something that it's good to know, but maybe it's not, it doesn't require optimization, and that sometimes happens. I think at least having the data, it's already one step forward, and then you can see what you can improve. But yeah, I know, Ansari, if you can give more details about your questions. But basically, we don't vary the conditions in a way. which is you can install your app on any device and run Apptim there, and then you can see what are the changes. But we don't simulate in a way different environments, like changing the frame rates or even changing the network, which is like another aspect of performance. But basically, as a user running your app or using the app, you can plug in Apptim and capture this data. Okay,
if anyone has more questions, please ask them. Meanwhile, I have more questions myself, so sorry if I'm dominating. I'm giving everybody time to type theirs in. Let's put it that way. So is that possible to actually measure browser resource consumption using Apptim as a result? Basically, can we measure browser navigating into websites and still capture all of the information that Apptim captures for other applications?
So you will capture all this information for the browser app. If it's correct. Chrome, yes, exactly. You can capture that. And that's a great question because we get that asked a lot. I want to test my website with Apptim. I was like, okay, you can test that. You're going to be testing that on Chrome or Safari or Opera, whatever browser you have installed. Do you care about how to optimize Chrome app? I mean, of course, I usually what I say in those cases is we are not meant for specifically for web performance testing yet. We started with mobile native, but I would recommend if you are the one, that you want to optimize your own website, of course, there are things that you might find interesting if you do that test. Let's say, measuring the performance of your website by using it on Chrome. But most of the information are things that I don't think you have control over. Maybe the rendering times would be something that you can look at, but most it's like how the app will use, CPU, memory, and things like that. You might identify things that are correlated to your website, but we don't take directly, data from like how you're loading JavaScript resources or how fast a certain page load on the website.
Well, in this case, I'm actually thinking of cases when you cannot explain things within Chrome developer tools or developer tools of the browsers, and you want to have like a second opinion, if you know what I mean. Like, is memory increasing as I expect it to? Basically, how can we forget about the browser environment and do a little higher level analysis? So
that's true. Yeah.
Battery consumption is another one which browsers might not have enough visibility into either.
Totally. I think it is a valid point that not always, optimizations are related to specifically, things that you load on the client side, and it does depend on the browser. And sometimes you don't know where the problem is, and you just want to make sure that maybe it's not you. So yeah, for sure. I mean, because of the way Apptim is meant is to actually identify which is the app or the process that it's running and measure that. So in this case, it would be, for us, it's the same if it's the browser app or if it's any other app that you have installed that you wanna capture this data. So I'm pretty sure there's something there that might be useful as well.
It would be very interesting to see how visual metrics and user experience metrics can be extracted out of this video and low-level metric consumption actually for mobile apps, because I feel this kind of correlation of user experience performance, forget about technology, user experience performance is what actually matters, and that would be awesome to see how that.
Yeah, I think we are going into that direction, because that's also a way to convince teams that if you, and it happens to us many times, like, what can I do? What should I look for in a graph that shows me the rendering times? Like, what does that mean even? So if there's a way that you can correlate, as I try to explain it today, if this is happening on the frames per second, the user might expect a disruption in the animation. So you might identify the disruption, but you don't know why it is. So then you have to go to the next step and identify what that is. Usually, if you are familiarized with how the app is built, which generally the developers are, it's easier for them to know what's the cause of the problem. But after you pass that stage, and sometimes you don't identify that until the app is actually in production, it's just really hard to correlate. Maybe a user will say the screen is freeze, and then how you reproduce that, and how do you know what caused that specific screen to be freeze for a certain time. And I think there is a lot of benefit by in a easy way correlating what the user experiences with what's happening under the hood, which is all this metrics that we are capturing. So I think we're going that way. But yeah, right now I feel that we are still in a stage that a lot of companies are being more reactive to, like, something happened to a user, or we are having issues with this version of OS. Let's go back and see like what's happening. It happened as well with other types of performance tests in the past, but I think it's changing. The more like tools are easier to use, faster, cheaper, all that helps a lot to get this type of testing done earlier. Okay, I think that there's another question. Can any tool measure impacts on rendering times on the mobile app user and the test under induced rainy? Okay, so yeah, so I guess the question is, like, if you want to simulate, for example, lower frame per second or lower battery charge, if there's any tool that can measure the impact of those conditions. I would say you can, like, there are tools today, even one that we connect to, that it's a tool in the cloud. It's actually a device form. You can simulate, for instance, different networks. So you can say, okay, I'm going to test on this device, and I want the network connection of this device to be according to this latency and this bandwidth. And then you want to run the test, and then you want to gather the performance data, and then you might be able to compare that to the same app running on a different device with different network connection. That's something that today is available. You can also configure, the battery availability on the app that you want to test. So you can recreate certain environments, I guess, of the app under test. From my experience, which it's usually the testers that will kind of define those scenarios, and then see if there's a way that you can automatically include that on your test if the tool allows. The ones I know are those ones. Network simulation is something that you can do. How much battery is left as well. And then a lot of the changes will probably happen between like developer and testers. If there's a specific version of your app that you want to be implemented in a different way, you might ask developers to give you like another version, and then you want to test both and see what are the differences. That's from my own experience on how you can recreate these environments. It might be interesting to see like an automated way to have a tool that will automatically install your app on different devices with different conditions, and then you can see this difference in the reporting, in the data capture. But yeah, those are the ones that come to mind that you can measure in terms of changing some variables in the environment where you're testing. But usually it will be like testers, having, you can actually select devices that you have a lower RAM as well, like the memory available, and then there will be one case for you to test. But it's mostly on the planning and getting access to the devices and configurations. I hope that answers the question. Any other questions or thoughts around what's going to happen during and after the pandemic with performance, particularly with I guess is a topic that we are all concerned about. Actually, before we leave, I wanna share some resources. So Abstracta, which is my previous company, we write a lot about performance testing in general. It's not only about web or client or mobile, but I think there's a lot of information there. You can go to that blog. Of course, Aptim also, we should start our new blog as well. So there's some more details there about different types of tests that you can run. And yeah, please reach out on Twitter or to my my email, which is Sofia@aptim.com, if you have any questions. Any feedback is welcome, or just exchange ideas as well.